episode of the Sri Lankan Understanding, a program where we explore about the history of Sri Lanka and where we are looking at it, history, archaeology and cultural history, and how it has influenced us and how we can look forward. So my name is Lilanka Botejue. I am a tea trainer and marketer by day. At night, I am a writing owl, and I have a passion for archaeology, which I follow through an MSc, and that is what I am following here. And I have with me Chryshane here today.
I'm Chryshane Mendis. I work in cultural diplomacy during the day, and like Lilanka, in the night I'm an independent researcher and archaeologist. And my research again focuses on military landscapes and fortifications, and I actually did archaeology for my postgraduate studies. So that's where we get into this. And,
and today we have an exciting episode. So Chryshane, we are going to be talking about the last king of Sri Lanka's cell, where he was kept, and then of course is it history, invented history, or what it is. So would you care to share with us about the last king of Sri Lanka's cell?
Yes, so as you all know, Sri Vikram Rajasinghe was the last king of Sri Lanka and king of Kandy, and then in 1815 in March he was captured by the British, and then he was brought to Colombo. And well, there is in Colombo a small prison cell next to the Selinko house, Selinko Towers. In Colombo Fort, and that is currently believed to be where this last king of Sri Lanka was kept before he was deported to South India. And this is also very intriguing that this monument, it's known a lot among the tour guides and the people in the tourism industry, but not again so much among the common people who
pass that way every day. So this is opposite the Twin Towers,
right?
Right,
opposite the Bank of Ceylon
Bank of Ceylon, and
right when you enter the Selinko house, just before their car park, you would see this sort of a
it's like a little
half
dome,
capsule,
it's like a spaceship.
Very odd-looking structure, and so at the rear end there is a bust of the king, and all with several stone plaques stating this is where he was kept. And when you go in front, it's actually like a prison cell. There is a door with iron bars, and inside the door is locked actually, you can't go inside. And inside you get the portraits of the king, his chief queen, and also pictures of I think Brownrigg, the ship he was taken, and also a picture of his tomb in Vellore in South India. And so everything there tells you an amazing story of how the king was captured in Kandy, brought to Colombo, stayed for almost a year here in the fort in a prison with his two wives and his mother-in-law. And that prison is barely enough for one person. Like I don't think you can even lie down properly.
It's literally like a little cell.
Essentially,
it's very small.
So like you would immediately sometimes ask, okay, so like the king actually stayed here with so many other people. For 11 months, what exactly is the story here? So then that's where I started, you know me, like I can't just wait when I see this kind of
likes exploring version. And see, this is the beauty of archaeology in a sense, and I think that's one of the reasons that attracted me also to it. There is no absolute truth in archaeology. It's not like mathematics, right? There are hypotheses.
Exactly.
And your hypotheses and theories can be disputed with evidence. And that is really how science really is. And so that's why archaeology is seen as more of a science discipline more than a sort of like, because historical records, cultural things can be very subjective. But archaeology is a bit more evidence based, especially when it comes to what we call the material culture. When we say material culture, it's tangible, physical things. And you build up a hypothesis around it. So even in archaeology, so you can have very well established theories or hypotheses about certain events and situations. And if somebody is able to disprove those with enough evidence, then that becomes accepted because, you know, through research publication, like any kind of scientific finding. So Chryshane loves doing that. And so he has...
it makes you feel like a detective. Essentially. The archaeological training makes you see all these evidences.
Exactly. And see, that's also, life is like that, right? I mean, the more we explore and learn more things, the better our knowledge base is. So this is an aspect of archaeology that we want to also highlight, you know, history, the past, things that we see today. There's not just one version of things, right? There are several versions, and all those versions can be legit. right? So this is an important thing for us to understand as Sri Lankans. I think we grew up with a very sort of a fixed view that this is a historical narrative and that's an absolute truth.
And yeah, not to challenge it.
Yes, which can be very problematic, right? Because you must challenge things in life. I mean, not for the sake of it, but also
if you find it contradicting, yeah,
exactly.
There is no harm in going beyond.
Yeah,
and trying to
and that is really what improves our critical thinking ability, and also it helps in long-term things like tolerance, understanding different people's points of view, which helps you just in general life as well. So when it comes to things like archaeological findings, and in this particular case, I think Chryshane has gone on his own and done his own little research, and he's gone and discovered things about this because it didn't ring right with him, right? Or he felt. What did you feel, Chryshane?
Yeah, I felt that was a bit weird that like the king would be kept in a prison cell with a whole family like that, because I had before that just cursorily read that he was treated well by the British generally.
Okay.
So I was like, okay, this is a bit odd, because if you go there, you might not think to question that monument because it's a protected monument by the Department of Archaeology, and there are 3 plaques there giving the story of that, and like in stone, in granite, it's inscribed there, so you wouldn't really want to question that.
You wouldn't question
but
it because
of
we,
course,
but of course, Chryshane did.
I have a little bit of a neophilia, so I question things, and so that's when I started getting into it, and like it didn't take long for me to realize that that narrative was false. So I think within the first day when I went to the National Archives and started reading the government gazette from the year 1815, and that very clearly states that the king was brought in March, so he was captured in February, on February 18th.
Right, and this is from Kandy, right?
From Kandy, yes. He was brought from Kandy to the Colombo fort on March 6th, and the government gazette states that he was housed in a spacious house and provided with all facilities, but it was barricaded so as no one can intrude on his privacy. So like, and apart from that, there is also the publication of Dr. Henry Marshall. That was his book was published in 1846, but he was actually one of the medical officers in the British garrison, and he interviewed the king, and in his publication that interview is there. And so he says, again confirming the government gazette, if the government gazette wasn't official enough, you have this interview with the king where it is taking place in this house, and the king thanks, of course it's a translation in Marshall's words, but the king thanks that I am now the late king of Kandy, but you all have provided me with all the facilities needed. And so it's all the evidence is there, like to show that the king was kept in a house. Okay, so then as it is, it's very clear that he wasn't kept in a cell. It would have been more under house arrest. Of course, he didn't have the freedom to go around in the fort. And so he was kept there for 11 months, and in January 1816 only he was deported to Vellore. So as at now we have evidence that the king and his family was well looked after for 11 months in the fort of Colombo. And so then the big question mark came on that monument. All right, so what is this?
What is this monument? So we are going in for a commercial break. Stay tuned as Chryshane will then explain to you what exactly that monument could be. Hi, and now we are back to learn more about the last king of Sri Lanka's cell in Colombo, and whether it was really the place where he was kept or was he kept in a house. And I have Chryshane here with me, who is going to give his investigative report or his evidence as to where Sri Vikrama Rajasinghe really was kept during his last days in Sri Lanka before he was taken to India.
Yeah, okay. And so like I was telling just before the break that so there is clear archival records that the king was kept in a house in the fort. Again, where that house was is a bit of a mystery because the fort was it was largely residential, but mainly for the higher officers of the military. So the governor was there, and all the senior officers had their residences apart from the army barracks. So there were houses, and even this where the current Selinko house is, where this monument is, that it's actually bordering Janadipati Mawatha or Queen Street, and that stretch actually had residences during the early British period. Okay. But later on these were changed. So then I began to see, right, okay, where is this evidence of the house being here? And
so now we are looking for a house for Sri Vikrama Rajasinghe and not necessarily a cell, right?
Not necessarily a cell.
Because
exactly.
of the accounts that
Yes.
claim that, and obviously if he was staying with his wives and his, you know,
That would have
few
been
courtiers, people to assist, then where were they staying? It couldn't have been in that tiny space.
Yeah, no, ideally it would have been in some sort of a spacious house.
Yes.
And so, of course, I couldn't really find evidence to see in which house exactly he was. Maybe there is, I have missed it at some point.
I saw you had used certain mapping tools
yes.
also.
So that's where
I
couldn't figure out, okay, where exactly the king's house was.
Yeah.
But then I went on to say, okay, now we know this is not what it is.
Yes.
Then my next question was, what is that monument then?
Yes.
Who built this? And
Yes.
how did this whole popular narrative of the king being imprisoned in Colombo come about, where you had clear published documents stating that he was under house arrest.
Exactly. Not a cell arrest, a house arrest.
Exactly.
House arrest,
yeah. Exactly. And so then when I was investigating that particular location, so yes, there was a house during the early British periods, possibly originating from the Dutch times. And then somewhere in 1860, the house is demolished, and there's a large building, about a 4-storied building being built there by the Darley Butler Company.
Okay.
So it's still existing,
Existing,
but the
yes.
building, of course, does not. And so that was the location of the building. And so, yeah. So in 1860, the building comes up. But by the end of the 1860s, another large change takes place to the Colombo Fort. So that's where they begin to remove the ramparts of the Colombo Fort. Again, not all the ramparts. Much of the western ramparts are still remaining.
Okay.
That's maybe another
That's
episode.
another topic to talk about,
and,
yes.
so much of the eastern and southern ramparts were taken off.
Okay.
And this block is actually quite close to the southern ramparts,
Right.
near the Dutch hospital.
Okay.
So the area where the World Trade Center and the BOC tower is, that was where the ramparts were.
Oh, okay.
So when they demolished those ramparts by 1871, that space became available, and the prime reason to demolish those ramparts was because the British wanted to build a new army barracks. And so that's where they built the Echelon barracks by the 1880s.
Okay.
And so
that's why it's called Echelon Square.
Echelon Square, exactly.
That's right.
And those series of buildings were there until the early 80s, apparently.
Okay.
So many of the older generations in Colombo would remember this building.
it.
And so that was about 5 or 6 large blocks. And over there, when you look at the subsequent maps of Colombo, you see there is a small side entrance right next to the Darley Butler building for the army barracks.
Okay.
So that entrance was facing Queen Street or Janadhipati Mawat. And the maps clearly show a small guardhouse.
Okay.
With a small gateway. And so when I did sort of comparative analysis from these maps to modern day satellite images, and even there were photographs of this gateway from the 1920s and 30s.
You have published this, right?
Yes, so this whole research is...
Because it's nice to see the way he has superimposed the maps on top. Because really, archaeology, when we study, I mean, a lot of people think archaeology is digging and they have ideas of either, what do you call it?
Exactly, and
Temple
so
of
this
Doom.
is also an interesting case study to show that archaeology is not just the material culture alone, it's used a lot of historical research as well.
Exactly.
So
and modern technology. Use Google mapping and just superimpose old maps
I was using
there.
historical documents like a historian would do, and I was using the archaeology side of examining the site and the building. So it was a lovely historical
archaeological merging of
exactly.
And that's really how we look at even archaeology today, is what you call multidisciplinary.
Exactly, and it's very different.
Yeah, it's not just about some guy digging up. I know everyone thinks it's just digging. That's one aspect of it.
Yes.
But you have things like Google Earth, you have Google Maps, you have even LIDAR and things like that Chryshane has used. We can talk about those later. But what's important here is that how he uses different aspects to figure out what really that building was. What is the cell there? And, he found that it is what? A guardhouse.
Yes. So, like even from the photographic evidence, it was very clear that at least in that very location, there was a guardhouse. Guardhouse that gave entrance to the Echelon barracks.
To the barracks, which were where the British Army was housed.
Exactly.
Yes.
And so when you compare the satellite images and older maps, the exact same spot this small monument is, is clearly visible. And so is where the guardhouse was, and that guardhouse was very modest. It was a square structure with a wooden roof, a four-sided wooden roof with tiles, and yeah. But then, when you come back to the end of the Dali Butler building, I was like, okay, this is exactly the location of this structure, the old guardhouse. And then, intriguingly enough, there was the Selinco company by the time had acquired the Dali Butler building and its adjoining land. Okay. And then in 1955 they begin to construct the Selinco house, what we know today, which was incidentally Sri Lanka's tallest skyscraper at the time.
At the time. We seem to love building the tallest things.
And now it's just like,
Yes.
And so there's an interesting photograph taken from the Bowers apartment complex. So that's near the Chatham Street clock tower.
Okay.
And so that view incidentally was taken before the Central Bank building was built. So now you can't get that view.
Right.
But from that view, in 1960, that photograph was taken. You can see the Dali Butler building there, and right next to it, the Selinco house being built under scaffoldings. And then you have right next to the Dali Butler building, the current monument, what we see now.
Okay.
So it's
the cell.
The cell. So
Yes.
it's very obvious when you compare the evidences that in the 1950s, or rather towards the end of the 1950s, when the land was acquired by Selinco company, they probably got part of the army barracks. So that's how, because this was an entrance to the army barracks. But I couldn't figure out that relationship yet, but somehow it fell within their premises.
Okay.
And then next to the Dali Butler building, they built the Selinco house, and in 1962 they demolished the Dali Butler building. So currently their car park area is where the Dali Butler building was.
And which would have been previously the house that you,
yes,
that you possibly a part of it would have been.
British period house there.
Yes.
So it was very clear that this prison cell, the monument what we see now, originates from the late 1950s. So it would have been either they would have completely demolished that guardhouse and rebuilt it new, or maybe part of the walls of the guardhouse, because they are more or less the same size. The shape is different.
Right. You said that was a square building, but the current
this
cell
one is sort
circular.
of a half semicircular.
It's like it reminds me of like a spaceship, no? Like a
yeah,
bullet,
exactly.
like half a bullet, like cut in half. It's like a curve with a flat middle, so it's like a bullet cut in half.
And so that's where I came to the conclusion that okay, so this current monument is not what it is, and then it's probably after that time only that the whole narrative of the king was imprisoned in Colombo comes into that monument, and
to that particular spot.
To that particular spot.
Right.
So yeah, where exactly the king was, the house he was kept in, we actually don't know.
We don't know.
Is maybe a future historian, a researcher could check that out.
That's there.
I don't have time for that.
Yeah, because see, I mean, this is very interesting. So basically, what your research showcased was that what we see today as a monument or the cell of the last king of Sri Lanka, Sri Vikramarajasinghe, is actually a narrative that started in the 1950s.
Exactly.
Because the location of the cell is something that is very new.
Yeah.
And whereas per the historical and gazetted accounts talk about a house. So what does this tell us? We're going in for a small commercial break. Stay tuned as we talk about it in the next segment. Hi, so we are back again to talk about an exciting find when it comes to the cell of the last king of Sri Lanka, Sri Vikramarajasinghe. Was he really in that tiny little cell which is located next to Selinco House in Colombo Fort, where you can still see it today, noted as an archaeological monument. So Chryshane here was telling us what his evidence showed, what he has discovered, because where the king originally stayed was, as per the records, a house. That is clearly not a house, and what he has found is that it was a guardhouse to an army barracks before the echelon barracks, and now it has been converted to this cell from 1950. So Chryshane, tell me, what does this tell us about historical narratives, archaeological monuments? What are the lessons we can learn?
It's actually a fascinating example to see how it's a case of invented heritage.
Okay.
Like, you know, things out of nowhere come to be associated with something, and now this is generally well known, and like you speak to a lot of the people in the tourism sector, or the general population who's interested in history knows about the story that the king was kept here, and But yeah, it's interesting how it's just 60, 70-year-old story.
And the thing is, what's also interesting is, Chryshane, now it's not like you have clandestine information that you went and dug around. This is publicly available records.
So, I mean, to put on record, so I initially wrote this to the website hi.lk. That article is still there with lots of maps and photographs.
Yes,
then I wrote
please
it to
check
the Sunday
it out because
Times.
it's interesting. Go and see it.
Yeah, and formally I got it published in the Journal of the Royal Asiatic Society.
Okay.
So that went through a blind peer review process, and it came out as solid evidence.
Yes.
And they said, yeah, your findings are correct.
Correct.
And so that was my validation. So of course, just because you write to the papers doesn't
mean it's correct.
It's
and I think that's an important point we need to bring in, because today what we see is a lot of invented history, as you put it, invented archaeology.
Yeah, and they love to go into social media,
sensationalized topics. But the thing is, see, you can have exciting discoveries like what you discovered through actual proper systematic evidence-based research, which is really what we need in today's day and age. There's so much misinformation.
Exactly.
And what happens is when you have invented history, the dangers of it is it can obliterate the actual fact, or it can obliterate a version of things, or sort of distort a version of things, and that can be problematic, because like I said, we've been taught through our education system and our school systems never to question or criticize or ever question the status quo, never to dispute a narrative. But the truth is, critical thinking is very important. It's a huge component of living today, and it's one of the things that we really need to develop. And so in a world where now with social media, everyone's an expert, everyone's an archaeology expert, everyone's a historical expert because they Googled something and discovered it. The fact that Chryshane mentioned his article was peer-reviewed. So Royal Asiatic Society is one of the oldest societies in the world. It is one of those very scientific based organizations where peer reviewed by fellow historians and archaeologists. That's important, because when you have blind peer reviewing, they are able to then either dispute or accept.
And that the biasness is also gone. So
and the bias is gone because it's blind peer reviewing. So we are here to advocate for things like that. It can be exciting. I mean, you don't have to just go to a rock and create a sensationalized story or invent, I think poor Ravana has been projecting all around Sri Lanka at the rate the social media experts are going. But here you have a very interesting theorem that he discovered for himself through evidence that is freely available.
Exactly.
Right. So, and it's not like this was hidden information. And what is important here is also the fact that sometimes we need to look at also why that history was invented.
Exactly.
Perhaps.
So that is to me the most intriguing question, which I couldn't actually come up with.
Yeah.
But I try to look at this from a spatial heritage point of view, because in general, when you take Colombo, it is a colonial space.
Yes.
So it's all monuments from the Dutch and British periods. And you hardly get anything that is local, or a monument or a building that is linked to a Sri Lankan, Sinhalese or a Tamil or a Muslim. And so in this colonial space, you have this monument now of a Sri Lankan king, of a Tamil king of a Sri Lankan Sinhalese kingdom.
Yes.
And so, yes, it is a fabricated story, but I'd like to see that we can actually consider it a monument to the last king, of where he was, I mean, for whatever said and done, he's a very controversial character, but he was the last monarch of this entire country. And so it can be taken as a monument to where he last stayed in Sri Lanka.
Yes.
Not the exact spot, we don't know that, but I mean, he was in the Colombo fort. So that's how I would like to take it. And I mean, I encourage even the national tour guides as well. I took a couple of them on a tour recently, and I said, so now you all actually have an interesting story to tell more about this monument.
Exactly.
That, okay, you have this popular story and then you have this academic story. And see, these two come together, and then there is this controversy and contradictions, and it's interesting to show the different aspects of places.
Yes, and see, this is why it's also important to keep your mind open to the fact that something you may have believed for a long time may actually not be so.
Exactly.
Right?
And I feel that's a bit weirdly common in Sri Lanka also. Like this place, I have noticed a couple of other places where sort of mistaken identities, either on purpose or not, I'm not too sure, but clearly places or monuments of mistaken identities are there. For example, a lot of the Sri Lankans love to call any old colonial period building a Dutch building, even if it was clearly by the British. For example, the Ratnapura fort, it was built by the British, the one you can see there, and the date is also given 1817, and everyone still calls it a Dutch fort. Whereas the Dutch fort was on a different site.
Oh, right.
The same is for the Ruanvela fort, again a British fort built in 1817, and it is still there, used as the Ruanvela police station, and yet people call that the Dutch fort. The Dutch fort was on the other side of the river.
Other side of the river.
And there's another one in Badulla. There's the old marketplace. It's again built by the British, and it's actually built like in the architecture of a castle.
Oh, okay.
So I can understand why people will confuse that as a fort.
Okay.
But again, they call it a Dutch fort. The Dutch weren't even there in Badulla. So this is sort of a weird trend thing also.
Yeah. No, I think we imbibe a lot of things, and we think, I mean, like
again,
I said, it's the problem.
We don't question. It's
we don't question. This is belief in absolutes.
Yeah.
My mother told me, my father told me, grandfather,
yeah,
community leader, whoever told me.
Way.
Gospel truth. So problematic. So this is what we encourage you to do, to question things. And as Chryshane's example showed, the last king of Sri Lanka did not stay incarcerated in a cell, but that monument is a possible monument to the area in where he was.
Yes.
So
I mean, we can consider it like that.
Exactly. Yeah. So we've come to the end of our episode. Thank you for joining. So stay tuned for the next segment when we do the more on history, archaeology, and understanding our past so that we can make better decisions in the future. So stay tuned and thank you.